For being here. Thank you for joining us online. We have special visitors here with us tonight. Brian and Sandra Davis with World Bible School. He's the president of World Bible School are here. They brought the brand new catalog. We've worked with I've been here 31 years. We've worked with World Bible School long before I ever got here. Every congregation I ever worked at, we used World Bible School. It's been such an amazing resource around the world for missionaries, and we welcome them and thankful that they're here. If you'd like to talk to them about that, they're here after church, but they've got a big stack of these on the table in the foyer. And Joel was telling me they have new product that addresses like the younger generations and on video and all kinds of really good stuff. So pick one of these up and acquaint yourself with what all the things that they're doing right now. So so glad to have them both here with us this evening. Thank you. Just some folks who are in need of our prayers. Foster Caffey, of course, is receiving radioactive infusion therapy in addition to all of his other therapies. And, you know, he's experiencing a great deal of fatigue connected with that. Our brother Paul Linton will be traveling to Florida Saturday to begin a treatment regimen in Florida. So let's keep Paul in prayers as he travels and his treatment as well. He may be away for 6 months, so let's keep him in our prayers. Both Sister Nita Brindley and Sister Ann Brady are recovering from fractured ribs. Those are not connected. They weren't sumo wrestling or anything. Separate events, but they both are recovering from fractured ribs, which I know they don't think is funny at all. Mark Nicholas, of course, keep in our prayers. He's been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he is being tested for Alzheimer's. Carolyn Tapp, Poplar Hill in Warrenton, and she has a serious foot infection that they're finally getting ahead of, but she has so many other health issues that complicate things. Not forget Jairus and Juanita as well with all their health issues. We had word that Jose and Jackie Revelo's friend Ida Gatzinger is in rehab after undergoing 4 surgeries after suffering a stroke. Keep her in prayers. Let's not forget those who are recovering from surgery. Wes Ray, Mary Wilson. Mary had foot surgery. Wes had knee replacement surgery. Clyde Kemp and Rod Fisher were both here on Sunday. So we're thankful to have them back after they both had health issues. Let's not forget to be praying for Bill McCusker. Those who are fighting cancer. There's a lot of folks fighting cancer, but people who are under heavy-duty treatment right now. Raina Ramirez, Tina and Foster Caffey, Janine Easterwood, Diane Walker, and Terry Folker. Let's not forget our brother Robert Folker's wife as well. And so let's be praying for her. Everyone looking for employment. And we had this note just this evening to put our sister Vanessa on the prayer list. You're having thyroid biopsy Wednesday next week. Okay, we'll be praying for that, Vanessa. Thank you for letting us know. So we don't want to mention that. We have a new brother in Christ. Sergio Perez was baptized this Sunday. Is this 4 or 5 Sundays in a row we've had a baptism from our Spanish-speaking group? I mean, we very blessed and very a sweet young man, high school age young man, and he'll be here Sunday, so we'll point him out and you can give him a hug. But we're happy to receive him into God's family. Let's not forget the Fifth Sunday Fellowship is coming up, 5th Sunday of this month. Tuesday morning ladies class will start back on the 9th. If you need a book or more information, see Jessica Avery. You could have their ice cream and devotional at the home of Stephen and Amy Hill on the 13th of September, 5 to 7 p.m. That's a Saturday. That Sunday, the 14th, Manassas kids they had this event last year, and it was such fun. It's called Breakfast with the Bible, because there will be breakfast food, but it's going to be 4:30 in the afternoon. And they're going to be dressed up as Bible characters, and we'll have to guess who they are. I got lucky last year and made some really good guesses. And there will be activities for us to have with the children. It was just a lot of fun last year. That's going to be Sunday, September the 14th. And you know how you say, I can't wait till the fall when it will slow down? It ain't going to do that. September 28th, worship in the woods at Camp Amava in the morning. That's just an area-wide thing, and there's details about it in the bulletin. And then that evening, September 28th, the area-wide Spanish-speaking worship service will be here, 5 o'clock, and then a fellowship meal afterwards. It is always a wonderful event. Hope that you'll come to that. Other activities coming up later in the fall, they're in your announcements from tonight, as is a full listing of the new Bible classes. We're coming to a close to our summer series, and tonight Seth Tompkins is going to be speaking. Our topic is evangelists, and he's going to be talking to us tonight about Priscilla and Aquila. Really looking forward to that. But at this time, we're going to sing a couple of songs, and have prayer. Let's lift our voices together and sing praise to God.
Our first song tonight is The Love of God. It's in your songbooks. It's 646 if you want to use the book. Otherwise, the words are behind me. The Love of God. The love of God is greater far than tongue or pen could ever tell. It goes beyond the highest star and reaches to the lowest hell. The guilty pair bow down with care. God sent his Son to win his erring child. He reconciled and pardoned from his sin. O love of God, how beautiful, how measureless and strong. It shall forevermore endure, the saints and angels' song. When hoary time shall pass away, and earthly thrones and kingdoms fall, when men who hear refuse to pray, on rocks and hills and mountains call, God's love so sure still endure, all measureless and strong, redeeming grace to Adam's race, the saints and angels' song. O love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and strong. It shall forevermore endure, the saints and angels' song. Could we with ink the ocean fill, and were the skies of parchment made, were every stalk on earth a quill, and every man a scribe by trade, to write the love of God above, would drain the ocean dry, nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. O love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and strong. It shall forevermore endure, the saints and angels' song. Our next song is 873 in the book. Love, love, love. Love, 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 love. The gospel in our word is love. Love thy neighbor as thy brother. Love, love, love. Peace, 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 peace. Gospel in a word is peace, peace that passes understanding, peace, peace, peace. Joy, 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 joy. The gospel in a word is joy, joy that fills to ever-flowing, joy, joy, joy. Christ, 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 the gospel in a word is Christ. Love him, serve him, and adore him. Christ, Christ, Christ. And now we'll have our prayer before we go to class. Thank you.
Please pray with me. Dear Lord God, I thank you for letting us all be able to come together tonight to worship you, to think about you. I ask that you help all the college students that have recently gone back to college. Please help them to stay in your word. Please help all the students who are going to elementary school, middle school, and high school now. Please just help them to be in your word as well. Help us transition back to school better. And please just help us to end this summer quarter good. And I thank you for all that you do. And in your name I pray, amen.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's nice to be up here. As Barry said, we're kind of nearing the end of our summer series on evangelists. Super thankful for, it's been a busy summer and I haven't been around for a lot of them, but it's been great to be able to have that capability to go back and watch some of them on our YouTube channel. It's been super, super helpful, and all the classes have been really great. When Robert, last week when you were talking about how you're trying to fill that time with Epaphroditus with your 6 verses, I was thinking, you know what, I'm kind of glad I have Priscilla and Aquila, because I think it's a good amount to put in a 45-minute class. It's like, man, to try to fit Paul or Timothy into a 45-minute class was tough, but Don and John did a great job of doing that. But I've had a great time getting to know these two really well. And when I chose this, I think I got the list near the end, and I kind of looked at my calendar, and this was one of the few days where it was open. That was my calendar, so it was kind of just fortuitous that it happened, but I'm super glad, and it's been just a great study of these two, and I'm excited to talk about them today. So when I got them, I'm looking at this duo. I tried thinking of some other famous duos, if you will, they're always referenced together, where you don't see one standing on its own. And I thought of like Bonnie and Clyde was kind of like the first one that I thought, where like you never hear about just Bonnie or just Clyde. Like without them together, they're nothing. And I was like, I couldn't really think. I saw Batman and Robin. I was like, but Batman kind of got his own thing. He doesn't really need Robin. I thought maybe like the Wright brothers, like Wilbur and Oliver, like they're always together. You don't see them separate. My daughter Renona loves Calvin and Hobbes. Like you always see them together. You don't ever see them separate. But there wasn't as many as I thought. And then I kind of started thinking about personally, do I know people that, couples or neighbors or family that, when I think of them together. And that was a little bit easier for me, actually. And two kind of came to mind. And the first ones was this couple, Dave and Darlene. Alliterations really help with those. But they were neighbors. We moved to the country when I was 7. Anybody that grew up in a farming community knows that neighbors, that is their community. That is who they leaned upon. These are an older couple. Everybody that surrounds them, that is who you depend upon. Right? There's no Amazon. If you needed something, you went to your neighbor. And so they, brought us into that community, not being farmers, but we felt a part of that community. And I remember, as a kid, seeing them always together. And whenever I saw them apart, it just didn't seem like something was missing. Invariably, when you talk to Darlene, one of the first questions is, "Hey, how's Dave doing?" Or, "Hey, Dave, I saw Darlene. How's she holding up?" Inevitably, when you talk to one, the other one came up in conversation right away. And so that's kind of who I thought about when I was going through Aquila and Priscilla. And I'm sure you guys probably have something similar. I've only been here for a year, but Jerison, Juanita, you pretty much can't say them without talking about each other. I mean, they seem like that kind where, when you talk about them, you talk about them together. So here is Aquila and Priscilla, which, again, kind of the cool fact is they're only referenced together in the Bible. They're never talked about separately. Every time that they're mentioned across 6 verses, 4 books, they're always together, which is just a cool concept. And it really highlights kind of that marriage and that team and how they did their evangelism, and we'll see in some of their interactions with various people how they use that to lift up Christ, like we had talked, Barry had talked about, right? What is the object of our faith? We are there to lift up Christ, and these two just did that in just an incredible way. So we'll kind of look. We'll start off where we first meet them. So we're going to go into Acts chapter 18 and verses 1 through 3. So Acts 18, verses 1 through 3. First time we meet Aquila and Priscilla. Verse 1, "After these things, Paul departed from Athens and went to Corinth, and he found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to depart from Rome, and he came to them. So, because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and worked, for by occupation they were tent makers." So we're introduced to these two. We get a little bit more about Aquila. So, born in Pontus. So if you know, that's like the south side of the Black Sea, modern-day Turkey, a really beautiful area. It's kind of a mixture of Greek and Persian cultures. If you look at pictures, right, it's a gorgeous area, really fertile lands, kind of mountainous, and then coastal with like kind of really fertile lands in between those two. Pontus is the Greek word for sea and ocean. It was actually one of their Greek gods that kind of presided Poseidon, so it's kind of their Greek god of the ocean. And another cool kind of little fact was, I don't know if you've ever watched Jason and the Argonauts, the movie, but like that area is where they, talk about Jason and the Argonauts looking for the golden fleece and different things. So just like a really beautiful area with a lot of history. It became a kingdom in around 280 BC after the Persian Empire kind of collapsed, and Alexander the Great kind of became its own kingdom for about 200 years. And then in about 63 BC is when we see the Roman Empire come in. And so we know, obviously, that Jewish communities were there because we see Aquila was a Jew from Pontus. But we also see Pontus referenced in Acts 2 during the day of Pentecost. So when they talk about all the different communities and people that are there, Pontus is referenced as one of those. So we can expect maybe a couple generations of Jewish families are in Pontus. But for whatever the reason, Aquila moves to Rome, where he meets, we expect, his other half, Priscilla, in the city of Rome. We don't know as much about Priscilla. They expect, based on the name, which is a Latin name, it's kind of the Roman diminutive of Prissa. So we kind of see reference as Priscilla or Prissa in some places. But it's kind of usually a more noble name, if you will. So potentially she came from a little bit higher class than Aquila. But regardless, that's where they meet, married, and eventually move out to Corinth after Claudius. So Claudius comes in, or Claudius is there, and there's some uprisings in the Jewish community, and he's basically like, all of you troublemakers, basically just get out. And so Aquila and Priscilla then proceed over to Corinth, where they set up and are there for about a year, maybe a year or two before Paul shows up. So Paul, at this time, just a little bit is in Athens. He just left, Thessalonica, Berea. He's been kind of chased all the way down. He's in Athens, kind of waiting for Timothy and Silas, and just to kind of I was trying to get in kind of what Paul's mindset is as he showed up at Corinth, right? He's probably, he's been running. He's just been in Athens, where he's surrounded by all these super intelligent people who want to, talk and debate. The great Areopagus speech that he gives about to the unknown God, where it's just, I can imagine Paul's like, he's right here. Like, you guys have it right here. What don't you understand? And at the end, right, like half of them just mock him, and half of them clearly just like Paul because he's good at talking or debating, and I get the idea that they just want to debate him and talk more, but they don't really care about the message that he has. So imagine Paul shows up to Corinth kind of tired, and he's alone at this point, and he shows up and he meets these two, Priscilla and Aquila. And as we go, I'd see these two as maybe like an older couple. Maybe they had kids, but they just embody so much about a godly marriage and a team and unity. I imagine Paul meeting them was just a great relief to him, and somebody that does the same work that he does. And so not only does he get to bond together over God and their beliefs, but they also get to work together. So how great is it that he gets to do both of those with these two individuals at the same time. So that's kind of where we're at, where we get there, we meet them, we get this this quick introduction, and we'll talk about like the tent makers aspect of it. That's kind of one of the things that they talk about. Paul, we know, is a tent maker, and he kind of provided his own way, so he didn't feel like a burden to churches. And so Priscilla and Aquila kind of show, I think they're very relatable in that way, in that they work, they have a job, but that they're also doing the evangelism and the ministry that they're called to do. And so I think they're very relatable in that fact. So we meet them, or we talk about them a little bit later. So they're there for about a year and a half with Paul. We know Paul's ups and downs. Silas and Timothy show up. He essentially gets upset with, he's done with the Jews at Corinth. He basically shakes his clothes and says, I'm done with you, I'm going to the Gentiles. There's some ups with Crispus and Justus, and then there's some more downs as he has to go in front of Gallio. And I think this whole time, right, Priscilla and Aquila are watching this, and they're learning from Paul. And clearly, I think they're, as we'll see in later chapters, kind of the impact that these two had on Paul when as they're mentioned later in later books. I think during this time, just kind of being either that sounding board or that place to come back to, I think is very apparent. But they're there for a year and a half, and then Paul's basically made his vow that he's going back to Jerusalem to go back for Pentecost, and so he needs to sail and head that direction. And so I imagine he's looking at time and space and the places that he has to go, and he's going to stop in Ephesus, and he wants to leave somebody at Ephesus. And so he brings Priscilla and Aquila with him. So if we go down further to 18:26, which is okay, sorry, 18 and 18, and we'll read down to 23. So Acts 18:18. So Paul still remained a good while. Then he took leave of the brethren and sailed for Syria, and Priscilla and Aquila were with him. He had his hair cut off at Cenchrea, for he had taken a vow, and he came to Ephesus and left them there, Priscilla and Aquila. But he himself entered the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they asked him to stay a longer time with them, he did not consent, but took leave of them, saying, I must by all means keep this coming feast in Jerusalem, but I will return again to you, God willing. And he sailed from Ephesus. So he makes their way over there with Priscilla and Aquila. He's there for maybe a short period of time, and then he's off to go continue his stuff, but he leaves Priscilla and Aquila there to continue the ministry, and where we get into, I think the best example of how they personify or exemplify evangelism is their meeting with Apollos. So we look at in 24, so Acts 18:24. Now a certain Jew named Apollos, born in Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things of the Lord, though he knew only the baptism of John. So he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Aquila and Priscilla heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. And when he desired to cross to Achaia, the brethren wrote, exhorting the disciples to receive him, and when he arrived, he greatly helped those who had believed through grace. For he vigorously refuted the Jews publicly, showing from the scriptures that Jesus is the Christ. So we get here and we get this interaction between two pretty different people. You have this very well-educated man from Alexandria. He shares a lot of similarities to Paul, with the big difference being he says he's eloquent and he's trained in speech, which we hear, Paul that's kind of his weakness, his self-proclaimed weakness, if you will. But besides that, the boldness, the fervent in spirit. One of the cool facts is Apollos is actually the only one that's explicitly stated to have fervent in spirit. Clearly, there's other people in the Bible that show that, but Apollos is the one where they explicitly say one who's fervent in spirit. So clearly, like a very enigmatic individual, knew about God, was ready, but had one missing piece. It is the big piece, the piece, right? He only knew about the baptism of John and didn't know about the baptism of Jesus Christ. And so I'm imagining, Priscilla and Aquila at the synagogue hearing this and recognizing that he's so close. And he just needs a little bit of teaching, and if he's willing to listen, I bet you they could go and they can steer him in the right direction. So when I look at this interaction through kind of the lens that Barry had talked about over the last year and a half, for our make disciples, go teach, baptize, I see Priscilla and Aquila in that go, right? They didn't have, they were kind of forced to go to Corinth, but they're there, and and then when they go to Ephesus, they follow, so they're going, like they're on the mission, they're out, and they're not just at home, right? They're in the synagogue, they're out in town, they're looking for ways to interact, to proclaim God, and they're out there doing the thing. They're going, they're out looking for opportunities. They're probably not the public speaker like Paul is. So I doubt they're up in the synagogue talking like Apollos is, but they're listening and looking for that right opportunity for the interaction. And then I think, right, they see the teach. I think this is where they really nail it, right? Apollos, clearly someone who loved God, had his talents of speech, natural boldness to teach accurately the things of the Lord, but he's just lacking that the one aspect, the object of our faith. And so they recognize this and they pull them aside. And I don't know if this was a conversation over multiple days, multiple weeks, or if this was kind of like a one-time, one conversation, and Apollos just, the Holy Spirit came through, and that was the moment. That's all the moment that he needed. Regardless, those two did it the right way and got Apollos to where he needed to be, and the Holy Spirit took it from there. And right, we see Apollos mentioned, further on in different chapters of Acts, and just kind of how the impact that he had on everybody. And then that baptized portion, right? While we don't specifically, it's not explicitly stated that he was, baptized, we can assume that he followed through with that teaching, and he was baptized in Jesus Christ and kind of continues on. So I think we see these, they nail the go teach, baptize in this example of talking to and ministering to Apollos. And what I want to really emphasize here is how they did it and how their marriage and them doing it together was kind of the thing to emulate or to look at when we look at these two. So the key thing when they spoke to Apollos is they did it together. So when we see in verse 26, when Aquila and Priscilla heard him, they took him aside and explained to him. So this wasn't just Priscilla, or this just wasn't just Aquila taking Apollos aside. This was the two of them together explaining the way of God more accurately. I think what a great example of just Genesis 2:24, right? Therefore, man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. They were doing this together, not just working together, but laboring in God's word together to bring Apollos to show him the object of their faith and to lift Christ up, and just how cool of an action that they did that together. And it's just an example of what a godly marriage can accomplish when you prioritize Jesus and use that marriage to further God's kingdom. There's a couple parts. I think it depends on maybe the translation, but Priscilla is mentioned before Aquila 4 of the times. Some people maybe read into it a little bit, too much, like using a woman's name first. I think it's noteworthy, it's not a standard thing to do in that day. In this case, my translation, it says Aquila first, and whatever that reason, why they chose Priscilla first or Aquila first, I'm not sure. I thought, maybe Priscilla has that personality that you remember somebody from just how warm they are, just how welcoming. There's some people that can just disarm you and open you up. And it reminded me of a story of, Rachel's not here, I think she's watching, but I didn't run the story by her, but she tells it about her dad, and so I think she'll give me the thumbs up. But Rachel's dad, who's the preacher over at Annapolis Church of Christ, has that very that personality that you remember very well. But Rachel was at training in Norfolk for some flight school stuff, and she goes to this coffee shop with her friend Allison all the time, and that's where they would study and hang out when they weren't at work. And they were there for a few months, and their goal was to become the regular. They wanted to be the person. There's a couple that owned it, were really nice, and an older couple, and the food was good. It was a cool atmosphere. And they really wanted to be, to walk in, and I imagine they walk in and they hope that the owner would be like, hey, Rachel, small black coffee? Like, yeah, all right, sit down, I'll get it for you. I imagine that's what she's envisioning she wants to happen. And they go there week after week, I'll say months probably, and it never clicked. For whatever reason, he doesn't remember. Rachel's dad shows up for graduation, I believe, and they take him to the coffee shop. And they order, and he, again, just from Tennessee, he's got a very distinct accent, just very welcoming individual. They get a coffee, nothing crazy, and they sit down and eat. And the next time Rachel goes to the coffee shop, the owner goes, hey, you're the one you came in with your dad the other day, right? And she goes, I spent months trying for it to be me, and now I'm just referenced as that guy's daughter. And so that's maybe kind of how Priscilla is that she just has that personality that you remember, and she's just able to open up and whatever it is. But they do it together, and I think that's the key here, is that it's not just one of them. One of them individually probably couldn't have done this, but together they were able to talk with this person that's from a well-educated, eloquent man and convince him that he's wrong about it, or he just doesn't know something, and he needs to look at the object of our faith. And so I think that is just a really great interaction, and to show that they did that together. And I think it also shows, right, we get some instruction from Paul throughout the New Testament, who's an unmarried man, on how marriage should look. And act. So we see in Corinthians and Ephesians, and we know that Paul, right, isn't speaking from experience. We know that he's speaking, the Holy Spirit is guiding him, and the words were breathed out by God, right? Like we know that is where he got his writings from, and the ultimate example of what marriage looks like, which is Jesus and the church. But I can't imagine the possibility of him writing these lines about marriage and not thinking about Priscilla and Aquila and kind of how they exemplify that as well on kind of what marriage should look like. So, I just imagine Paul, when he's writing these letters, that he's thinking of Priscilla and Aquila when he's looking at what godly marriage should look like. It's also, right, Corinthians and Ephesians are the two churches that Priscilla and Aquila were with Paul at, and those are the two that he talks to about. So I think that whether that's related or not, I don't know, but that's just kind of what I was thinking. The next thing that they did, right, is they spoke to Apollos with love. So if we turn to Ephesians 4, and we'll look at 15, and then we'll kind of look through 7 through 16. But Ephesians 4 and 15. So we'll kind of start in, Ephesians 4:15 is the verse, but we'll kind of start before we read 14 through 16. So, that we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men and the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. So we see Priscilla and Aquila find, Apollos after he's done speaking. I think this is, an important part, right? They aren't doing this for argument's sake. It's a great, contrast between the people in Athens that Paul are, where they just want to argue, they just want to talk, they just want to prove to the other person that they're right. That's not what Priscilla and Aquila are about. They don't care about that at all. Their goal is to correct Apollos in Jesus Christ, and so they take him aside and teach him privately, right? They didn't wait. I imagine they're just kind of sitting in the corner, wait until everyone's done talking with Apollos, and then they kind of gently take him aside and teach him the word more accurately. So while there may be times that, right, public correction is necessary, they knew that this wasn't the right avenue, and by taking him aside, right, that was the way that it needed to be done. They saw a man who loves God and a man who had the energy for the Lord. He just needed that rudder steer to get him on the correct path. And it's also important, right, that the way they use love in Ephesians 4, right, that's our agape love, that selfless, sacrificial love that we see and that's embodied by Christ. So, Apollos no doubt saw Priscilla and Aquila's love of Christ, but also kind of the love for each other. I imagine that was probably very apparent in that interaction that he had with them when they were talking. And then thirdly, I think, right, they continued their discipleship by continuing to support and exhort Apollos. It wasn't just a, hey, let's talk, you got it, everything's good, okay, and then move on to the next person, right? It's not a check in the box. It's not just a, hey, we're done with you. They clearly wanted, they knew, where he was going and what he could accomplish, right? And so Acts 18:27, we see, and when he desired to cross to Achaia, the brethren wrote, exhorting the disciples to receive him, and when he arrived, he greatly helped those who had believed through grace. So Apollos wants to go over to Corinth, and so, Priscilla and Aquila know people there. They write them a letter, and they basically, pay the way, hey, this is a great guy. He's ready, he's willing, he's fervent in spirit. It reminded me, too, of, when you write a letter before somebody goes. For me, it was kind of like, as a pilot, there's lots of different squadrons in the Marine Corps, and while it's a smaller, it's a small community, so you kind of know everybody. There's maybe one degree of separation, but inevitably you know somebody who knows somebody. And it means a lot more, right, when you're at a squadron and you hear from a friend where they go, hey, you know, Mike is showing up to your unit next week. This is a great guy. He's a great pilot. You know, you guys are going to love, you're going to love him. He's going to be a great member of the team, right? That means a lot before he even arrives. Vice when somebody shows up, Mike shows up, and you reach out, and you have to reach out and be like, hey, who's this Mike guy? Is he any good? And like, oh yeah, Mike's good. He's a great guy. It doesn't have the same effect as when somebody reaches out beforehand before he even comes to kind of exhort and build him up. So we see them, you know, talk to apostles together, do it with love, and then continue that support as he goes over to back to Corinth to kind of move his ministry along. Okay, before any comments, questions? Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think that part of your analysis is really interesting because when you think about the cultural difference between Priscilla and Aquila, to be able to bind that together, move to another area where they are, and then take in someone who's from a totally different culture. The second thing is, if you have any Jewish background at all, it is not normal for whether it's the male who marries a non-Jewish wife to not have some of that cultural thing about the men that she might speak to outside, but to have that home opening to where they're there and allow that, and then to understand there was a heavy caste system back then, and to actually understand that whether Apollos was in the same as or not, just tells you how cross-flowing things were for them and how they actually were able to use it to their advantage, regardless of that, in a diverse culture that now they were somewhere in. When you start talking about families that have to PCS and move in, move out, and hearing about people and knowing that they're coming with a good reputation or not. If they don't come with a word, still to be welcoming, and if they do come with it, to be a part of that, because it is fascinating to understand that they sat down with him and knowing that that was the missing link and being able to get across to him so that he was open and receptive to it, and then left there with that same fervent spirit.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? And we see them do that multiple times. We see them go from their home in Rome to Corinth to Ephesus to back to Rome to back to Ephesus. Right? They're moving and they're going to all these different cultures, and they're able and speak to who they are as well as their ability to assimilate or draw people to them regardless of those differences. And yeah. few more times across 3 different books. So in Romans 16 in verse 3. So again, kind of the timeline, they're in Ephesus for a while, for a few years. They go back to Rome. Whether, family's there, whether they, Claudius is gone and they're able to return, whatever the reason is, they head back to Rome. And we see some letters that Paul is now writing and mentioning these two. And so in Romans 16, verse 3 through 5. All right, this is a greeting. So greet Priscilla and Aquila, my fellow workers in Christ Jesus, who risked their own necks for my life, to whom not only I give thanks, but also all the churches of the Gentiles. Likewise, greet the church that is in their house. Greet my beloved Manassas, who is the first fruits of Aquila to Christ. So we see, just in this one, we see kind of 3 kind of really important things too, right? Verse 4, we see that Priscilla and Aquila at some point risked their lives for Paul. So, here that's another example of where Priscilla and Aquila's heart was, right? While we don't know how they risked their lives or what specifically it was, we know they did it in support of Paul and his ministry. When I saw this, right, you think of John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. Again, we don't know exactly how they did it, but they risked their necks. And even in the face of death, again, we see that they did it together. They were side by side. It wasn't Aquila risked his neck. It wasn't Priscilla risked her neck. It was the two of them together risked their lives for Paul's sake. I think what stronger example of love and marriage and faithfulness, what a great example of love and marriage and faithfulness for us. We see Matthew 10:39, whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Romans, if we look over at Romans 12, verse 1, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. They're doing this. They've done it, and Paul is eternally grateful. When I was going through this, obviously it's pretty apparent that Priscilla and Aquila are brought up a lot when you're looking at marriages and stuff. And so I was looking through some different articles online, and there's a really good line that I found, this little passage from this guy named Marshall Siegel, and it was written about kind of like a 6-step thing about marriage, or I don't remember exactly what, but this stood out to me when I was looking at the verse where they talk about risking their own lives. And so it starts off with, God doesn't mean for every marriage to step into the same fires they, meaning Priscilla and Aquila, did, but all Christians should expect and embrace suffering for the sake of Christ. And this is the line that really stood out to me. While we should strive to protect our marriages and families from evil, we should not protect ourselves from suffering in love for the faith and joy of others. Has the comfort and security of marriage and family kept some of us from obeying Christ and taking the right risks at ministry? It really puts it in perspective, right? He's not saying that, we shouldn't, protect our families, but, right, the line where we should not protect ourselves from suffering in love for the faith and joy of others. Priscilla and Aquila they exemplified that with Paul, and all the churches, saw that, and just what a great example to all these early churches on how to do that. The second part of Romans 16:4, right, says to whom not only I give thanks, but all the churches of the Gentiles. I think this just shows the far-reaching impacts that these two had. Again, how many churches, Gentile churches, are there at that time? It was in 10, 20, 15, whatever it was. Everyone knows about these two. They have a far-reaching impact. They probably weren't formally trained speakers or especially wealthy or a member of a high society, but their own strengths as a marriage and a team together had impacts across that whole region during their time. And then Romans 16:5, it talks about, right, likewise greet the church that is in their house. So we see this other part of Priscilla and Aquila, their hospitality, right? They're using their house for their ministry and doing that house church that we hear about, and opening it up as a way to further God's kingdom. We look, the Greek word for hospitality is philoxenia. So philo, which is love, xenon, which is stranger. So it basically means love of a stranger. So they're showing that love of strangers to these places that Rome, maybe where they're from, but all these places that they go, they're opening up their home, and they're just showcasing the way to lift up Jesus and his word. I also kind of so if you look, so we read a little bit in Romans 12, but there's 3 through 17 are just some great verses. And so I want to read through that, real quick, and just listen to some of the, I saw Priscilla and Aquila in a lot of these, right? This talking about serving God with spiritual gifts. You see these spiritual gifts that Paul is writing about. And again, I'm imagining he's thinking of Priscilla and Aquila amongst others when he's talking through these. So Romans 12, starting in verse 3. For I say through the grace given to me to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, but all the members do not have the same function. So we, being many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. Or ministry, let us use it in our ministering. He who teaches in teaching, he who exhorts in exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. Let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good, be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer, distributing to the needs of the saints, given to hospitality. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. Now, you go through that and you see so many aspects of what Priscilla and Aquila exemplified. And again, Paul, that relationship that he had with these two was clearly extremely important. And again, I can imagine that when he's writing this, he's thinking of these two. And so kind of the last two references that we have to Priscilla and Aquila are in Corinthians and Timothy. So if we turn over to 1 Corinthians 16, verse 19. So 1 Corinthians 16, 19. So the churches of Asia greet you. Aquila and Priscilla greet you heartily in the Lord with the church that is in their house. So he's writing to the Corinthians. And they know Priscilla and Aquila. How cool is it that they're the only ones mentioned by name, right? They talk about the churches of Asia greet you, and all the verse 20, right? All the brethren greet you, greet one another, but they talk about Aquila and Priscilla greet you. I imagine when they're getting this letter, right? Obviously, it feels great to hear that all the churches of Asia are greeting you, but then to hear their name from people that know them, probably haven't seen them in a while, I imagine that was pretty empowering to hear that. So again, we can see kind of the long-lasting effect that these two had on the churches and the areas that they went to. And then finally, so we see in Timothy, 2 Timothy, so 2 Timothy 4:19. So this is, more than likely, Paul's last letter. He's in prison in Rome. These are the last words that are penned in the last few lines, his final greeting, before he finishes it and says farewell, right? Greet Priscilla and Aquila and the household of Onesiphorus. So at the end, these two are the ones that it comes to his mind when he's in that jail cell, and he's thinking of the people. Imagine he's thinking of all his journeys and the things that he's done, and these two, kind of lead off that final greeting. So I think, you can't overstate that relationship that these two had, with Paul, and what they were able to do with Paul's help in teaching, and what they accomplished in the various regions that they were at. So I thought it was, seeing that kind of like at the very end of Paul's last letter, I think that was really, really cool to see, and really highlight kind of the impact that those two had from prison. So, any comments or questions? Okay. So kind of, just to kind of to wrap it all up, right? What I really liked about Priscilla and Aquila, we talked about kind of the relatableness that they had. The church has survived and moved forward and continues, to grow because of, the individuals and the couples that make that daily decision to prioritize Jesus. And these guys did it, right? They did it. They don't get the fanfare that, that maybe your Paul or your Apollos or your prominent speakers do, but they absolutely played just a vital role in that time period, and really just a great example for all of us to kind of emulate, right? A lot of us, a lot of the church are married, and so we have this great couple that we can look to. Obviously all that they did, their ultimate example, right, was Jesus. He's that perfect example to us, and kind of what a marriage looks like with him in the church. But they're, just a great, biblical representation, a couple that you can look at and, kind of associate with, and see how they were hospitable and, humble, and just all the things that they did. It was just a really neat study that I was able to look at those two. All right, I think that was second bell. All right, perfect. Thank you so much, and I enjoyed it very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, how good it is when the family of God dwells together in spirit, in faith and unity, where the bonds of peace, of acceptance and love are the fruit of His presence here among us. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people. Oh, how good it is on this journey we share, to rejoice with the happy and weep with those who mourn. For the weak find strength, the afflicted find grace, when we offer the blessing of belonging. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people. Oh, how good it is to embrace His command, to prefer one another, forgive as He forgives. When we live as one, we all share in the love of the Son with the Father and the Spirit. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people. So with together. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my